Well, you grew up in an
Especially
old
when you're
country.
like, so what do you think? I'm like, damn it!
Alright, so we're live. Alright, well, thank you for joining in, everybody. Glad to have you with us today on this Tuesday morning. It is the last day of March, getting ready for April. I do want to take this moment, I'm probably going to say it again sporadically throughout the session, but I want to take this moment to plug an event that I have coming up this Wednesday at noon. It's going to be a very special presentation. I have a local doctor, Dr. Cheta, who is a doctor at Our Lady of the Lake, and he's going to be joining me. We're going to have an interview. I'm going to read your questions to him. So if you want to get a question read online for the show, please submit those in Google Classroom, or you can submit them on the show page. You can go to the event, look it up, and go ahead and leave your questions. So I'm going to leave those questions for him as well. The ones that get their questions answered, I'm going to make sure I hook up with bonus points. So please make sure you get on Google Classroom and leave your questions, comments, anything like that, anything you want me to address with Dr. Cheta. Okay. And let's see. Let me swap over the screens here real fast.
Somebody's coming.
Alright, there we go. Alright, let's see who we got going today. Get real fast. Alright, we got 4 people watching. Give y'all a couple moments
Who's here?
to get in here. Okay, let me put the... Again, as always, if you're joining us for the first time, we're doing this using Nearpod. I'm going to put the website in there. Okay, and today's code is PSCFQ. Okay, get everybody joining in and participating. And I want to I say this at the beginning and end of every one of these streams, but I always want to take a time to say I appreciate you showing up. I appreciate your dedication to your education. I know it is a tough time here dealing with coronavirus and being on quarantine. I hope everybody's staying inside, staying safe, doing their part to flatten the curve. My favorite person to watch is joining in. This is my favorite right here, and that would be my daughter Elizabeth. So Elizabeth, thank you for joining us today. Glad you could come. I am so excited to have you here with us. I won't lie, I'm a little biased. That's my favorite viewer right there. So I can safely say I love that viewer. Alright, so let's get going. Hopefully some more people will show up with us today. So when I last left off, we were talking about the Reagan administration. Now, as we get into this administration and future administrations, I want to kind of caution everybody. Let's go a little bit backwards to something I may have said to some of y'all at the beginning of the year. And that is, it is really hard as you get forward in history or backwards in history. And what I mean by that is, if you go far enough backwards in history, one of the things you run into is credible sources, right? Like if you go back to the ancient Roman days, right, and you're trying to learn about how did Rome get created. The original stories of Rome are of these 2 brothers that lived to be like 800 years, and you know they could lift mountains with their own bare hands, and I think they wrestled for 80 years at one point. You know, this crazy situation. I think they were both like 16 feet tall or something like that. And
What?
yeah, it's just absolutely crazy. And you know, it's this really crazy situation. So obviously we know that's not a credible source. It was not. Rome was not created by 2 giant, behemoth, 800-year-old brothers that fought for centuries, you know. So we know that's not accurate, but there may have been 2 brothers named Romulus and Remus. That may have been the case. Right? We don't know. Maybe there was at least the idea was started by two houses named Romulus. There could have been some amalgamation of that, and as the history goes forward, it gets distorted, right? So I told you about the difficulties with talking about history back in time. Now let me go a little bit to the other direction, talk about the problems of talking history as we get closer to modern era. And that is, we kind of talked about it with the Zen Master situation, Charlie Wilson's War. We don't know the impact of history yet. We just don't know, right? Like, I didn't learn about Charlie Wilson's War. It wasn't that big of a deal when I was growing up. We had no idea we were funding the Taliban and Al-Qaeda that would eventually come back to bite us in the butt. So bear that in mind, that as we progress forward into the future, right? This is, I know for y'all, this is like way, way long ago. We're talking about the 80s. So I want to caution you with that as I go forward into history from this point, here on forward, it's going to be really tough because history has yet to judge completely in its totalitarian. Yes, in its totality. That's the word I'm thinking of, totality. History is yet to view it in its full totality, the ramifications of the events that we're going over today. So if you read about this story, say 20 years from now, it might be that I left out this huge event, this life-changing, history-altering event. I just left it out because we didn't know at the time it was going to be life-changing and, history-altering. Okay, so we're leaving out of the Reagan administration. We're going to talk today about George Bush and or at least his dad, and this H.W. Bush. Right? This is not George Bush Jr. that would be president for 2 terms when a lot of y'all were very little. This is George Bush Sr., his dad, who was president in the late 80s. By the way, you can't see.
I know that.
Sorry. Okay, so at the age of 18, H.W. Bush would enlist in the U.S. Navy, right? He was a naval aviator. He was one of the youngest in the Navy, and he was a combat pilot in World War II. He was going to be shot down by the Japanese, and his 2 crew members were killed, and his whole squadron gets shot down. Now, the rest of the pilots were all executed, and the reports were that the Japanese executed them and ate their livers.
Nah.
Well, that's their account of the story.
Yeah.
So, but he would be quoted as saying, "Why had I been spared, and why did God have? What plan did God have for me?" He was later awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross.
Which one is he? Wait.
Oh, sorry. He's this guy right here.
Oh, okay.
Right here. That's H.W. Bush. So my kind of question to you is, does someone having been a war hero increase your willingness to vote for him? Does it have an impact on you?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
You think so?
Yeah. Especially when it's something as horrific as, that one, that, this person is the only one, the only survivor, and how the Japanese ate that liver, and I don't think that's the truth. They might cut their heads off, but they wouldn't eat them.
By the way, I want to take this time to say thank you for joining us, Raleigh, for joining us, Quinn, and thank you for joining us, Bushra.
They're always here.
Yeah.
Yay!
Yeah, these are some good students.
Yes. See?
Yeah, all yeses across the board. Okay, so H.W. would go on to Yale, where he would finish with in only 2 years.
Whoa.
Yeah, whiz kid, right? He'd get a degree in economics, and he would even play in the College World Series twice as a left-handed first baseman. So he was a dual athlete / wonder kid, right?
Is he rich, like growing up?
I mean, he was definitely privileged growing up. I wouldn't necessarily say he was rich. He wouldn't be rich until he got in office, like rich, and later on until he got into some political connections. He would get his first campaign going against the incumbent Democrat in Texas Senate. Now, keep in mind this is right around the time of the Southern Swap. And he went after his opponent for supporting the Civil Rights Act of '64. Right? He was against it. His opponent was for it. Now, he would lose, but then he would go on to run for a seat in Congress, and this time he ran by supporting civil rights legislation. So in 4 years...
He changed his mind.
Well, when you listen to him debate, it does sound like he genuinely changed his mind. Like he honestly kind of had a change of heart, if you will, on how he saw the importance of civil rights legislation. Mm-hmm. He would then go on to be head of the CIA and eventually Reagan's vice president. So what do you think changed his mind on civil rights legislation? Obviously, the low-hanging fruit would be to say, well, because he lost an election over it. But the rhetoric definitely sounds like he had a change of heart. So, and this kind of, you could branch it out into a further question. Why do you think there are people out there that change their minds on fighting for civil rights? Like in kind of more of an existential...
Well, I mean, I wasn't there, and
Right.
I don't know much about the legislation, but I can make an educated guess. But I'm guessing from 64 to 68, the media, and it's more welcome to actually support the civil rights, and therefore you kind of know, it's very hard to be racist when you see the other person as a person.
Right.
It's easy to be racist if you see the other person as something less than a human.
That's right.
So I'm guessing maybe that's why, a lot of people change their hearts.
And I'll even add to that point. It's kind of funny because I always think back to when I was a little kid. The idea of supporting gay rights was so taboo.
It's a radical.
I mean, that was a radical hot take, right? To believe that a man and a man can get married, or a woman and a woman can get married. I mean, I don't know the numbers, but it was well under half the population was against that, right? Flash forward to today, and more than half of conservatives agree with gay marriage. And like way more than half of liberals agree with gay marriage. So that's kind of an issue that in a very kind of relatively short time kind of flipped on its head. His son's vice president, Dick Cheney, is very outspoken against same-sex marriage, and then his daughter came out as gay.
Yeah, so
and then next thing you know, he's this staunch defender of gay rights.
Because it happened to somebody that you actually know.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a good point too, though. It's like, it's when the media comes out and you start seeing that change and it kind of softens your heart to it. Maybe that has a situation to it.
Well, just take the current situation. How many posts you see on Facebook saying like, do anybody know that somebody that actually have coronavirus? Did anybody know? Like, it feels like in the beginning of this whole pandemic, people do not trust that it's actually happening because it doesn't happen to anyone they know personally.
Well, and I want to take this point too, and Elizabeth, you're welcome to tell Joseph this. Mr. Cedric, Joe's Taekwondo instructor, his uncle has coronavirus. So. I don't know why it bounces back, but anyway, let's move on. Okay, so with an attempt on his life, right, so somebody tried to kill Ronald Reagan, right? It wouldn't be long before Reagan was back in action, but in the brief interim, somebody, after he gets shot, he would take over as president for a very brief moment, right? And he would be a key player in the Reagan administration. Because remember, I told you, vice president is basically whatever the president wants him to be. He can have a very close role, very distant role. Well, Reagan kept him as his right-hand man, so he's very close. And this would kind of bite him in the butt with that Iran-Contra affair. But at least for his being able to argue that he's ready to be president. And I kind of wanted to show this clip.
March 30th, 1981. John Hinckley was a 25-year-old with romantic delusions, convinced that actress Jodie Foster would be impressed if he killed the president. Outside the Hilton Hotel in Washington, D.C., Hinckley caught up with his target.
And I don't think there was a better demonstration of how that training worked than the assassination attempt against President Reagan. Judge Jerry Parr and Ray Shattuck, as soon as that first shot goes off, they grab the president and they throw him into the car.
Agent Tim McCarthy shielded Reagan with his body, taking a bullet in the process.
Yeah, he actually...
Within moments, the limo sped away from a scene of chaos. Hinckley was buried under a mountain of Secret Service agents. Agent McCarthy, Press Secretary James Brady, and D.C. policeman Thomas Delahanty lay on the sidewalk.
Okay, so what are some problems you think Bush faced as temporary president? He's only going to be president, I think, 6 weeks. But,
Did Reagan get injured?
Yeah, he got shot, yeah.
Where?
I don't know the exact... It wasn't life-threatening, but, you get shot. They're going to... You're the president, they're going to let you recover. So he spent 6 weeks. I don't know if he's sworn in as president, but he's acting president. But what are some problems you think he would face?
Well, it's like having to defend all the decision without actually doing the decision.
Yeah, right. Right.
Now you have to continue somebody else's messes, basically.
Right. Well, and plus, too, even if he's the vice president, fortunately for him, he was very close in the inner circle of Reagan. That's a good point, too. A lot of people probably didn't take him seriously. He's the acting president. That's not the same thing as being president, So that's a good point, too. What else are any other issues you think he might have faced?
I guess it's also, we have this discussion with Elizabeth before. When you are the president, your decision is not black and white anymore. It's all gray areas. And,
the easy ones get knocked out before they get to you.
Correct. And it seems like even the small things that you think, small decision that is in the gray area, it can affect so many people that no matter what you choose to decide is always wrong for some people.
Right.
And considering he's not actually the president and but now he have to make decision as president.
All the responsibility with none of the power. Yeah.
That will be really hard. I mean, you've taken other people's, when somebody quit and you have to take over their job.
Oh, when I have to sub a class, and I didn't know I was going to sub the class till that day.
Yes.
It's
now you're like, wait, what's happening?
All right, kids, what are we doing in here? I don't know. What class is this?
How far are you learning? And,
that's right.
Being the president of the United States.
That's right. Okay, so he's been vice president. He was president for 6 weeks. And he decides the following year he wants to run for president. So he's going to be given this kind of like conservative dream team, right? And the guy that kind of leads it up is a guy named Roger Ailes. If you may have heard that name. Roger Ailes would eventually be the guy that kind of runs Fox News when Fox News was in its heyday. Now, he will win the presidency in 88 despite not getting a public endorsement from Reagan in the primaries. So when he's doing his primary, Reagan doesn't even endorse him, right? He obviously will when he's running for president, but not in the primaries. Which, it should go on to note that Biden has still not got an endorsement from Obama. So, yeah, it's kind of fascinating. So anyway, he ran on the platform of lowering taxes, capital punishment, which, that's kind of the death penalty, basically, and gun rights. So he would eventually raise taxes, by the way, even though he ran on.
Oh, is this... There's this documentary on Netflix about this serial killer, of course. And I think he's the one that pardons him because there's a possibility that it's not the case.
I want you to save that thought. Hold on. It's not him, but it's save that thought.
Oh, okay.
Okay. But anyway, so why do you think Bush would actually raise taxes? Now, I want you to understand, too, he was real focused on balancing the budget. In fact, when Reagan first was running and they were debating against himself, Reagan ran on that platform, I'm going to increase military spending and cut taxes. Mm-hmm. And Bush kind of called him out on it, kind of rightfully so, of like, wait a minute, you can't lower costs. I mean, you can't raise costs and lower income, right? That doesn't work. In fact, he himself coined the term voodoo economics. And as opposed to Reaganomics, it was voodoo-nomics or something like that. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so Noel gets a good point. He's trying to stop the U.S. from going in debt. Like, he realized, like, man, Reagan has built this giant war machine. I wanted to lower taxes.
$800 billion.
Yeah, I wanted to lower taxes, but I can't do it. I can't make the math work. He was a Yale prodigy economist, yeah. But I mean, even the local person knows I can't make less money and spend more, not without going into debt.
Does he raise the taxes for everyone?
Yes, but more so for the poor
corporation?
The poor middle class.
Ugh.
He is a Republican. Yeah, supply and demand is not. You actually spelled it right the first time, Elizabeth.
What, Liz is Elizabeth?
Yes, that's Elizabeth.
Debt. D-E-B-T.
Yes, there you go. That's my girl. And by the way, we do got to kind of fly through some of these because Broadmoor's got a meeting that I got to go to at 1 o'clock with the administration. So we do got to kind of power through these. So, okay. So Bush ran a very nasty campaign against a guy named Michael Dukakis. This thing got really nasty, right? And his main focus of attacking him was, so Michael Dukakis, when he was the governor of Massachusetts, this might be what you're talking about, he pardoned a guy named Willie Horton, right, who was serving a life sentence. And he'd already been in, I think, like 18 years and had been exemplary behavior. He was on the death row thing. And, of course, he's running against Bush, who was fighting for the capital punishment. And he wanted to look like, look, these people can be saved, right? There's no reason to put them to death. We can save them, right? So Willie Horton was in prison for life for murder. And he would use his newfound freedom to go out on a murdering rape spree. So it did not make Michael Dukakis look good, right? That his poster boy for somebody who shouldn't be put to death is freed and then goes out and murders and rapes people.
No, this is not good.
He also goes against Dukakis for speaking out against the law that had forced all students to recite the Pledge of Allegiance, right? In the morning.
Wait, don't we do that now?
Yeah, we do. This is when that happened. Before that, it was not required. So anyway, Bush would win 426 to 111. So you can see the electoral map. It was a beatdown, right? And yeah, Nirali, if you're putting the answer down in slide change, it'll still save your answer. But I kind of mentioned it. I kind of book it because I want to make sure I get through all the slides so that we can. So just do your best. But anyway, so what do you think? What scandal helped Bush win the election?
Serial killer.
Yeah, when he pardoned Willie Horton, because that was a big issue. Because I remember that. Like, should people get the death penalty? Right. That became a huge issue. Right. And Bush was very much like, yes, there's certain people, they need the death penalty. And Michael Dukakis is like, no one deserves the death penalty.
Well, at least keep them inside.
Yeah.
When somebody killed someone. I mean, I know in the justice system, there's so many
right.
Like circumstantial evidence, and so you have to go to murder suicide of murder one. But if and it was decided that this person actually guilty for murder, just keep them inside.
Right. But he thought he had found his poster boy. Like, I'm going to free this guy, and he's going to be a productive citizen. And it's going to show that all these people you want to put to death, their lives have value and all that stuff. Like, the idea was great.
He chose the wrong person.
Yeah, he just picked the wrong person.
Poor guy.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Yeah, he pardoned the murder. Willie Horton. Guy's name.
So did Bush get two terms?
We're gonna get to that. He just spoiler alert now.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna move on. Okay, so I'm going to briefly mention this just because we're going to do a whole lesson on it next time I see you after the one on the quarantine. So this is going to be, I guess, Thursday. We're going to do the fall of the Soviet Union. It's going to wrap up the end of the Cold War. Kind of. We'll get to that too. But it happens while he's in office, right? While he's in office, the Soviet Union would collapse. Germany would reunite. This is the celebration of Germany reuniting. Is one Germany. There's only one Germany today. There's not East and West Germany. Out of the remnants of the Soviet Union, Russia would reemerge. That was like the largest state. Like, they were kind of a collection of states, and Russia was the biggest. But all the other states broke off. Like the Ukraine is one that broke off. Gorbachev would be removed to power because they saw him as like weak. And a guy named Boris Yeltsin would take place. And him and Bush would have this really close friendship. And again, we're going to go more into the Soviet Union. But how do you think why was the fall of the Soviet Union such a historic event?
Oh, just the fact that with the fall, East and the Germany is.
Well, Germany is reunited, right? I think there's elements too, though. If, like, it showed that it was definitely a blow for communism. You know, that this country that was the kind of poster child for communism didn't work. Mm-hmm. You know,
Korea still.
That's true. That's true. I wouldn't say somewhere I want to be though. But you know, it was a blow that the poster child for communism fell apart. There's also the element of, you know, they were our kind of biggest rival, right? The evil empire that Reagan had called it. You know, the Iron Curtain. You know, so it kind of removed our biggest adversary type thing. Yeah, a lot of people did see this as the fall of communism.
So Soviet Union was in charge of East Germany?
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
Yeah. Yeah, and when they fell apart, East Germany would reunite with West Germany. And today, Germany's a fantastic country. Although I think Angela Merkel's got corona, I think. So she's an elderly lady too, so hopefully she...
All politicians is elderly.
Right.
I wonder who's the youngest president out there.
Oh, I don't know if they're today.
Is it the Canadian guy?
Maybe. Justin Tupper. Okay, so during the 1980s, the U.S. had given a drug lord named, we talked about this, Manuel Noriega as an anti-communist dictator. Right, so we'd set up this anti-communist dictator. Here.
Still typing.
Here, go ahead.
Sorry, Jay.
Oh, yeah, we got you. We got you, Jay. Okay, so anyway, we'd kind of propped up this anti-communist dictator, and they had voted to elect a new leader. However, the communist dictator guy, he decided, nah, we ain't getting new leaders. I like being leader. So, even though this was a U.S. problem, and this had nothing to do with stopping the spread of communism, Bush said, you know what, this ain't right. We made a mistake. We shouldn't have sent this communist drug lord guy in to run the country. We need to fix this. So he sends in 2,000 troops for military exercises.
They need freedom.
Okay, knowing that they were going to attack the troops, which they do, and that gave Bush the green light to. Oh, that's okay, Raby. Glad to have you with us. But that gave they gave Bush the green light to go in there and invade. So I want you to kind of understand this wasn't an invasion because he's stopping the spread of communism. It wasn't to get resources. It was simply put, we had made a mistake putting in this evil drug cartel warlord, and he wanted to remove that guy and give those people their right to have a free president.
Yeah, I have to agree with him though.
Yeah. This is one of those times where I'm like, yeah, this is why we have a military. You know, this is one of those, like, you're stopping an evil guy in his tracks. It wasn't for personal, like, we didn't get anything out of it. You know, it was just us cleaning up our mistake, kind of.
It's so hard being in the military because you have no choice.
Right.
You know, presidents say, you go there, you go there.
Yeah, this is one that I actually kind of agreed with. Like, it does make sense, you know, putting this evil dictator in there, cleaning it up, getting it out of there. Although it looks like y'all disagree, so it's going to be fascinating to come to the next one we talk about. Now, the U.S. forces would make quick work of the Panama forces, and this would be called Operation Just Cause. We take out their leader, and he was transported to a U.S. prison. We were so effective, we only lost 23 troops, taking out the entire army. And Bush would argue that, you know, he could have done this under the Monroe Doctrine, or he could have argued about a threat of communism, but it wasn't that. It was just this was in the best interest of the U.S. to have a free Panama. Now, this is going to be a huge shift in U.S. foreign policy, because it used to be we had to manufacture some kind of reason to go into a country, right? Like with Vietnam, they attacked us in the Gulf of Tonkin, even though it didn't happen, right? Or in World War II, you know, it was the bombing of Pearl Harbor. World War I, it was the Lusitanian Zimmerman Telegraph. This is one that's like, we're like, hey, it's just the right thing to do. We have a big, powerful military. We messed with their country earlier, and it wasn't good. We need to go in there and help them out. And now Panama has a democracy, you know. So why is this a huge shift in U.S. foreign policy? And, you know, I kind of mentioned it's that that there's no causality to it. It's not like they attacked us or something like that. It was just, we realized, hey, this country needs help. It's the right thing to do. We're going to go in there and kick butt and take names. That's kind of the huge shift. I would say the huge shift is that we did it just because it was the right thing to do. Yeah, he didn't have an actual reason other than to help out the people of Panama. That's a good point.
I guess that's why it's hard to be, America, which is, someone that is very powerful, that everyone that needs your help is like, can you help us? And then people in America, they will say like, that's their problem. Why are you sending my kid to fight over there?
Right. I've often heard it as the only house on the street with a fire hydrant comparison. If the entire neighborhood has no fire hydrant and your house has a fire hydrant that's your fire hydrant, what responsibility do you have to your neighbors to let them use your fire hydrant? At some point in time, you're going to have to pay for all that water, so you can't just do it unlimited. But at the same time, your neighbor's house burning down, that's your neighbor, or even worse, your neighbor's house catches your house on fire. So, it's a tough situation. Now, after the failed war in Iraq, so we're going to talk about building up to Iraq. Iraq is reeling with debt. They got into a lot of debt trying to fight a war with Iran. Saddam Hussein was the leader of Iraq and decided, you know what would save us from debt? Let's just conquer Kuwait. It's a tiny little country, doesn't have much military defense. It's very rich with oil. Let's just go take them, right? Thinking nobody's going to mess with them. So why did he invade Kuwait?
Money!
Yeah, money, oil. As a matter of fact, you say it in one word, oil.
Yeah.
He wanted that oil from Kuwait.
So Kuwait is this sounds so stupid.
It's a country.
It's a country?
Yeah, it's a country, but it's smaller than Louisiana.
So is there a law, like maybe from the UN, that countries just cannot go to another country and take over right now?
Historically, no. Here recently, especially if they're like a member of the United Nations,
you cannot do that.
Yeah, that's right. You risk having your place in the United Nations, and you're about to see why, you risk having the United Nations deciding to sanction you, or in this case, bring forth military efforts against you. So the UN doesn't have an actual army.
Yeah, but they have the Guard.
Right, but they have and they can call upon nations to attack. There you go. Good answer, Elizabeth.
Get money.
I'm still not calling you Elias, though. Okay. Bush wasn't quick to war. He gave Iraq the option to leave peacefully. He would then decide to go to the UN and make sure he had support from the international community. He then supplied troops. Then the international community all came together, right? So it wasn't just us. The major players were Britain, France, Germany, Japan, South Korea, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. They all supplied troops. In total, 34 nations got together and supplied troops. And then this would be called Operation Desert Storm, right? So this is Operation Desert Storm. This giant conglomerate of nations all getting together to defend poor little Kuwait from evil Saddam, right? Now, Bush then went to Congress before he just brought in U.S. troops. I know this sounds crazy to y'all at this point, right? But Bush went to Congress and asked for them to pass a resolution for him to use troops. That's supposed to be how it's done. And I want you to hear this clip real fast.
Just 2 hours ago, Allied air forces began an attack on military targets in Iraq and Kuwait. These attacks continue as I speak. Ground forces are not engaged. This conflict started August 2nd when the dictator of Iraq invaded a small and helpless neighbor. Kuwait, a member of the Arab League and a member of the United Nations, was crushed. Its people brutalized. 5 months ago, Saddam Hussein started this cruel war against Kuwait. Tonight, the battle has been joined.
I'm not going to let you listen to the whole 12-minute clip. Why do you think it was so important for Bush to do this the right way? Like, he was really, he even mentioned, I didn't need Congress's approval, and Congress was controlled by Democrats at the time. So this was an uphill battle, and he barely got it passed. It was like 61%. But it was quite an uphill battle for him to do it the right way, so to speak. Why do you think it was so important for Bush to do this the right way?
To make sure he has support.
It's true. There's that. I want you to think back too. You know, I think there was an element of he wanted to show that we were a united country and a united world in this effort. That it wasn't U.S. going in there and kicking butt for oil. But I want you to think back too. Where did he get his start in his career?
What, Reagan?
Yeah. No, Bush. How did he get his start in his career?
He's CIA.
No, before that.
He graduated from Yale.
Before that.
Before that?
Yeah. He was a war hero, remember? He was a fighter pilot. Yeah. So this is like a military guy, right? He understands the chain of command. You don't just skip over it, right? And so it's very important for him, I think, being that military background, that he follow the proper procedures, you know, that he do it the right way.
Does he always do that way?
Yeah. Yeah, he's kind of a strong moral character. Yeah.
When you asked me the first time, I'm like, I don't know, is it almost election season?
Right.
Like, he needs to make sure he covers his bases.
Yeah, he's one of those guys. I didn't agree with everything, but I think he was a good principled dude, you know. He had this one time where he was really nauseous, and he was talking to this is back when Japan was just kicking our butt in trade, and really taking advantage of copyright laws and stuff. And he was talking to the foreign prime minister, and they were eating shrimp, and it was apparently bad shrimp. And he leaned over, and they're talking about foreign trade, and he goes, you know what I think of your foreign trade policy? And went, puked all over. It's kind of funny.
What?
Yeah, that happened. Anyway, so for 6 weeks, the world watched in awe as the military might of the U.S. had proved beyond any doubt that the U.S. was the most powerful nation on earth. Like, everybody already knew it, but nobody realized how far we were, right? This was one of those, like, you know, you thought it was going to be like a situation where it was like, you know, let's say...
what, LSU with Oklahoma last
Yeah, that it was going to be something like that. It's comparable talents. No, this would be like, you know, if a high school junior varsity football team had to go up against
LeBron.
You know, LeBron James on a basketball court. Or the Los Angeles Lakers. It's just they're completely outmatched. Now Iraq would release Kuwait and submit to inspections. Many people wanted Bush to remove Hussein and take control, but Bush decided we'd accomplished our objectives. I don't want to get stuck in an endless war in Iraq.
Let's head out
for trillions of dollars. I know it sounds crazy, but he's like, look, I'm going to back out. Now, why do you think, or how do you think the world was able to finally realize the U.S. had become the most powerful? And part of it is, and I guess I should mention this, everybody watched on TV. Like, everybody sat around watching their televisions going, wow, I didn't know we could do that. I mean, that was incredible. Like, this is the first time you're watching helicopters fly in pitch black dark. Nobody can see them. They're flying just barely off the ground, so they don't register on radar. And they're shooting these, like, pinpoint laser-guided missiles that are shooting people so far away they hadn't even heard the helicopters yet.
Jeez.
You know, and it's one of those like, wow, I didn't know we could do all that, you know. We took out Baghdad in like 48 hours. You know, I mean, it was an absolute...
it's PSCFQ.
Yeah, it's up here. If you look...
maybe it's rolled over or something.
Yeah. Yeah, let me tell you.
Do you know how long the Desert Storm was? Like on top of your head. How long was it?
It was like 6 weeks. Before it was over. You know. Right. So why do you think the world had able... Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you, Jay. Was able to realize that the U.S. had become the most powerful on Earth?
I wonder how much stronger we are now. And who's the number 2?
Probably China. Probably.
You don't think Russia?
No, not boots on the ground. Now, if you count in cybersecurity, they're kind of the big dogs right now as far as cyber warfare.
What about North Korea? You don't think they're strong?
I'd put them like maybe 5th or 6th, maybe somewhere there. But yeah, if you count in cyber warfare, oh yeah, Russia's making a stake for fighting to be number 1, at least as far as cyber warfare. Which, who knows? That may be the next great battleground. You know, if
now everything is cyber. Like,
right.
You know, right now we're sitting at home. We're very confident that the banks still have it still safe. You know, what if the bank got hacked and they're like, okay, nobody in the U.S. have any money.
Right.
You have to have real money.
Right. And by the way, thank you for joining us, Jan. So this will also see the rise of 24-hour news networks. Now, I'm not going to say that CNN and stuff like that they didn't exist before this. They did. They existed when I was a wee little baby, right? But nobody was watching them, right? Like, you might tune into CNN for the evening news, but nobody was watching it at 4 in the afternoon or 2 in the afternoon. Now, even at the gym, they're going to show CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News all day long. And they're like a regular news or regular channel where they have different shows and stuff like that. This would be the rise of this 24-hour news network juggernaut, because everybody's going to sit around and watch the news all day, every day. Yeah. And out of this would be the growth of Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, and others, even ESPN. Like, it used to be ESPN showed SportsCenter, and then they would show sporting events. Now they have like all these shows, First Take and Cold Pizza and all this stuff. That would come out of this model. And I kind of want you to see why. This is what the whole
August 1990.
This is
Iraqi
footage.
dictator Saddam Hussein sends his army into neighboring Kuwait. Its oil fields are rich for the taking. And Hussein may have his eye on Saudi oil too. Saudi Arabia quickly gathers its allies. The 39-nation coalition is the largest since World War II. They vow to bring Hussein to his knees.
Withdraw from Kuwait or face a coalition ready and willing to employ all means necessary.
8 Apaches from the 101st Airborne Division prepare for the 200-mile flight into Iraq.
We had to take out the radar sites at 2:38 in the morning, so all the aircraft could fly through this corridor.
The Apaches take off and speed across the desert, cruising just 50 feet above the ground to avoid radar detection. There's a total blackout on navigation lights, total radio silence. If Hussein's radar detects them, they risk being shot down by the very target they've come to kill. It takes just over 2 hours for the Apaches to reach the radar towers. When they're 5 miles away, they hover for a moment, surveying their target. This is actual footage from General Cody's mission, the very first Apache strikes of Desert Storm.
When we pulled the trigger, all 4 aircraft shot at the same time. You got 4 to 6 Hellfires en route. The time of flight's about 12 seconds. And then all of a sudden they start hitting. And when they start hitting, things start exploding pretty quickly, especially when we hit where the generators and all the fuel was.
This is computers lining up.
Okay, go to Flechette right here.
Look at them lining up with computers. And then everything.
At about 4 kilometers, we started opening up with the rockets that had the Flechette rounds. And that was to take out the air defense guns that were out in front. And then as we get closer, we'd open up with the 30 millimeter and finish off the job.
Yeah, it's like watching a video game.
It's like, what is human life anymore?
So my question is, do you watch the news, and if so, how often? That includes sports news.
Reddit and Facebook is how I get my news.
Yeah.
But during this pandemic...
your husband.
Yes. I do watch WBRZ a lot.
Yeah.
Just because...
I watch quite a bit of news. I watch many sources of news.
No.
No news watching. Elizabeth, I know you watch the news, right? She loves the news, boy.
She watch... What is that thing that she watch all the time?
Gotcha Life?
Gotcha Life, there it is.
Yeah, that's not
those
the news.
Tiny people.
Yes, no Gotcha Life. It's not the news.
My dad watched the news all the time, though. Like, growing up in Indonesia, 9 o'clock is... Every channel in Indonesia will change to world news. So you're kind of forced to watch it.
Sometimes, but not often.
Not really. I mean, I understand. News is kind of boring. but now it's like you kind of have to know. You know?
Right.
The question is, where do you get your news?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. All right, I'm going to give y'all just another second because we got about 14 minutes left. And again, I apologize that I'm having to go this fast. I really do.
Yeah.
I like taking these things as slow as I can. But
what about E-News?
E-News?
Yeah, celebrity news.
Oh, no. Okay, so under Bush, we would also create NAFTA into law. Now, it would actually get signed under Clinton, but it was put together by George Bush.
You don't like NAFTA?
Not a fan of it. I'm going to kind of let them go to it. Now, it eliminated all tariffs between the three North American nations, right? So, U.S., Canada, and Mexico could just trade with each other, no tariffs, all that stuff, right? This law would not be finalized until he's out of office. So, my question is, what are some potential pros and cons? Well, obviously, the pro is I can now buy cheap stuff from Mexico. What do you think would be the con to that, though?
Well, that means they can buy cheap stuff from us.
They could, theoretically. But what's the problem with that?
Exploitation.
There you go. So, like, Mexico can pay their workers, let's say, $2 a day, right? Why would I set up my factory here in America and pay my workers, minimum wage when I can set it up in Mexico and let their factory workers get $2 an hour? And so what that does is that actually drives down labor here in America, too. So it's kind of a tough situation. So it's got its pros. You get cheap stuff, but it's got its cons, and it's not good on labor.
I'm guessing both Canada and U.S. buy a lot of stuff from Mexico.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we do.
I wonder what's the minimum wage in Canada?
Well, a good one's oil. Behind the Middle East, the second place we get oil from is Mexico. So that's a good example.
You seen the gas price nowadays?
Yeah. It's dropping.
Well, nobody goes anywhere, first of all. And
it's been good on the environment, having this pandemic. If there's any silver lining.
Do you know anything about the virus in Middle East? Like, is it spreading also?
Well, there's a lot of close information. For example, in Iran, they've had mass graves so big you can see them from space.
Oh yeah, I heard about that.
Yeah, but of course Iran, I think they're saying they haven't had any cases yet. They're not exactly a hotbed of reliable news.
Yeah. Where's Al Jazeera from? Saudi Arabia?
Oh, yeah.
The news network?
Yeah. All right, looks like y'all are kind of getting it. Oh, that's fine. I appreciate you joining us, Nirali. Okay, so Bush would lose his attempt at re-election. He'd only be a one-term president. And that was a combination of factors. Probably the chief among those is the Clinton campaign. He was a juggernaut. I'll tell you this, when it comes to textbook how to give a speech, man, that guy wrote the textbook. He'd always do something that whenever I would tell people when they're having to give a speech, the kind of three-step process of you tell them what you're about to talk about, you tell them about it, and then you tell them what you just told them. He was the master of that. He also did a really key thing, you'll notice Obama did it too, is if there was something that was key to, that he was trying to push, he would tell you ahead of time. He'd say, now listen here, this is important. He wouldn't bury it, he would let you know, hey, focus in on this, right? Another one was that there was a three-person race. There was another conservative that ran as an independent named Ross Perot. Yeah, I'll put this live up. I will. But anyway, so he put Ross Perot kind of took a lot of votes away from him. Ross Perot is the guy that runs Texas Instruments, which if you ever had a calculator, like a TI-85, that's this guy. That's Ross Perot. He made those. Many speculated that the big factor, though, was that he didn't stay in Iraq. We'd never swapped out a wartime president. And so it kind of begs the question of, he could have kept the Iraq war going. His son certainly did. He could have kept the Iraq going, but he didn't do it because he thought, I don't want to hurt America. So in a lot of ways, you could make the argument that, he gave up being president a second term by doing so. That being said, even if it cost him the election, do you think Bush made the right decision to not invade Iraq?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's tough to do, though, knowing it's going to cost you the presidency. Okay, well, listen, y'all, that is going to do it for me today. I've now, as soon as y'all put in this answer, I now got to get ready for this staff meeting. I want to thank my lovely co-host here, Rachel Waldrop, for joining us today. And I want to thank y'all for showing up again. I appreciate y'all's dedication to your education. I want to make sure that I beg y'all, please show up tomorrow, participate, help me get this news out.
Tell your neighbor.
Tell your neighbors, tell anybody you can think of, tell them. Because I want to get good news out. I want to get good, reliable, accurate information
from
out
someone
to the
that is here.
From somebody who's actually participating. I trust this doctor. I've known him for a very long time. He's a close personal friend of mine. I know he's going to give us some good stuff. Real smart guy. Yeah, please go in Google Classroom. Leave your questions if you've not already done so. Some of you have already done that. I appreciate it. Leave some questions for me to ask him. And please show up and participate. So
tomorrow at noon.
Tomorrow at noon, Dr. Shetta.
We're going to have a discussion about the virus.
That's right. That's right. So any information you want to know about the virus, what you can do to help out, please show up tomorrow. Thank y'all so much, and y'all have a great day. If y'all have any questions, hit me up on Remind. You know my Remind code.
Or leave a comment.
Yeah, or leave a comment here. Sorry I couldn't continue the discussion any later. Mr. Raby, I'm still waiting on that theme song, just letting you know. And y'all have a great afternoon. Thank you. Take care. Oh, yeah, Elizabeth said tomorrow the lesson is on COVID-19. Yes. Yes, same time. Elizabeth, you know him. It's Mr. Hitesh. You know him. He's going to be showing up, and he's going to be giving us some good information. Same time at noon. It's going to replace the normal lesson. So please show up. Absolutely. All right. Well, thank y'all so much. Thank you to my favorite student here today, Elizabeth. She's my favorite, I'm not going to lie. Definitely love her. And y'all have a great day.